We are starting right now. So,
Right now.
welcome to Tuesday Talks, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is the most fabulous Charlie, one of my really wonderful friends,
Hi,
who
everyone.
is on lockdown in Japan, while I'm on lockdown in Italy from the
Yeah.
coronavirus. So yeah, we're super happy that we get to be here together and actually talking with each other the wonderful, wonderful things of modern technology.
Yes.
So, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Having a much better day than I think a lot of people are. But yeah, I had a really nice day. Got a lot of work done. Cafes are all empty, so it's really nice to just like be able to work from my computer and take that to a cafe and have the whole cafe to myself.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely went for a run this morning. So yeah, the streets were quite empty. It was
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah, that's cool. Kind of a ghost town, but
Yeah, exactly.
mm,
So we're going to be talking about choosing your perspective, which I think is wonderful for
yeah,
right now, especially.
yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. You want to start? You want to throw in the first punch, and we'll see what happens.
Okay. So for me, this is a super important thing because I really believe strongly in taking control of your life and not letting other people define your life's path for you. And that can mean all kinds of different things. And that for me has meant a lot of different things too. Especially coming to Japan as a foreigner here, there's this narrative that I think a lot of foreigners have here, which is you'll come to Japan and you'll be an English teacher, and that's all you can ever be. You can never integrate into the society. You can never, they'll never treat you with respect. And all of this, there's all of these narratives that you hear in your first year or two living in Japan, like you'll always be an outsider. And I don't like that people telling you what you can choose. Like I like to be able to choose my own story. And I'm just about to get into year 8 in Japan now, which is crazy to think I've spent the last nearly decade in Japan. And I'm still loving my life. My life is awesome, like and I get to choose that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Okay, so I'm gonna throw a yes and at you. Okay,
Okay.
so do you remember like the yes and
Yes.
brainstorming?
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, what I love about what you're saying is this idea of not having it dictated for you. Like that idea of it doesn't have to. When people are like it has to be this way or this is sort of the
Mm,
only options. Really seeing that for the lie that it is. Okay.
mm, mm,
And I have found something that's very interesting around this idea of controlling your own life and all of that kind of stuff, which is this really interesting play when I realize that in the end, I'm really not controlling my life. Like I'm not
mm,
actually the one that's in control. It's more kind of the universe that's in control of that stuff. And finding myself in the flow of that,
mm,
so that because I've had the same thing too of people being like, well, you can't do this, Carmen, or you
mm,
can't do that, or it's against the rules or whatever, all of those kind of you shouldn't do that kind of stuff. And to a certain degree, my life has been managed by the universe. Like I follow John around for his career and stuff. And so being in that place where I'm like, I am in the flow with the universe. Now, how do I interact with that? How do I play with that? How do I make my own choices within that flow that's kind of around me? I think that
mm.
it's this very interesting place for me to be.
Yeah, and there's nothing. I'm not saying like that people have complete control. Like I can't be the president of the United States. I wasn't born in America. I can't be a 100-meter sprinter as much as I wanted to when I was young. I just wasn't fast enough. Like, and some people are. It's like genetically they have a huge advantage to do certain things. If you have I don't know, if you have some kind of disability that stops you from running the 100-meter sprint in the Olympics, you're just not going to do it. But that doesn't mean that you don't have choices. Like, and you can't choose your attitude. Like there's this really fantastic quote that's really guided me a lot in the last maybe 5 or so years was Viktor Frankl saying the last vestige of human expression is your attitude, and they can't take that away from you. No one can take your attitude away from you. And Viktor Frankl, right? Like he was in a concentration camp in World War II. So like that, having that attitude after that kind of experience, for me in this modern world that's so convenient, so easy, like I get to have that choice, and I get to have it quite comfortably, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think that builds onto that idea, and I guess to build onto that idea of the attitude.
Mm.
Also this, like when we're talking about choosing your narrative,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the kind of, not, it's almost like that's like a step above maybe the choosing your attitude. It's like you
Mm.
choose your attitude, and then you choose the narrative that you are saying about your life with
Mm.
this attitude, almost like as a foundation. Or maybe it's like, here's some sort of events, here's
Mm-hmm.
the attitude that you choose, and then here's the narrative that you tell
Right.
about everything that's going on.
Right, and both telling to yourself and to other people, right? Like a narrative once you have your attitude, and having a narrative for your own internal narrative, what you're saying, the kind of story that you're telling yourself, you also tell that story to other people, and then other people can see into your attitudes. And I think maybe other people have kind of more of an insight into that sometimes than you have into yourself, when they can see like clearly there's something up with your narrative here. And other people see things that you don't.
Yes, I love that so much. I think that this is one of the reasons why um, having friends that will ask you questions. We were just talking
I
about people who
was just
like,
looking for that word. What was the word? Oh yeah, friends. Oh yeah.
yes, exactly. And so it's like, and it's also like the friends that will really ask you the probing questions, almost
Mm,
in service to you, that they're
mm,
interested in who you are truly on the
mm.
inside. And then be like, that's very interesting. I hear you saying this thing over and over again. I wonder if that's really, the narrative that you want to tell, or I see you as more than that, or, what's going, or even just like curiosity about it, of like, what is that? What's going on there?
Yeah, maybe it's like the friends that you have. Like, I'm trying to think of the right word as well. Like, it's a different word from friend. It's like confidant or something like that. Like the friend who cares enough about you that they'll call you on your bullshit. And that's, I mean, it's a rare thing. It takes time. It takes trust to have a friend who will do that. I'm glad that I have that kind of friend in you. I know you're always going to call me on my bullshit.
Always.
Yeah.
I think that for me, it's so like, I think that you are much more wonderful than you think that you are. The stories that you tell in your head are, and I'm like, I'm not accepting that
Yeah.
crap story that's going on in there.
Yeah, we've been through this. We've
Yeah.
been through.
I mean,
Yeah.
me too, right? I mean, I
Mhm.
I think that I do the same thing too, and I want friends who will be like, you are much more than that. You are much more than that story that you're telling inside of your head.
Right.
I know that there's a story that I don't know. This is such an interesting story that has been going on for me personally a lot. And it's in this like wider context. And it's really a story that I personally want to really bring to the forefront. It's important to me, which is this story of just a mom. And it's like,
Mm.
it's this story that we tell inside of our heads of like, well, I'm just a mom, So, and it's even like when people will go to apply for jobs after being a stay-at-home mom for 7 years, and it's like well, I was just a mom during that time, and it's, and it's such an entrenched narrative in us. Like it's so entrenched that I don't even think that I didn't even recognize it consciously for a really long
Mm.
time, that there was even almost like a different perspective from that narrative. And I still think it's out there in society of like,
It,
well,
it's such a strange narrative as well. Like, why is that? Why is that a just a?
no,
It doesn't make sense.
I know.
And it doesn't make sense to me as well. And I wonder if, especially, I don't know, it seems like it's kind of regressing to the 1950s in a sense in the modern world, where we have this kind of like view of motherhood like it's not good enough. And I see this a lot, and kind of especially amongst people who are self-proclaimed liberals, who they say like, yeah, they want to support women's rights to choose and women's right to work in the workplace. But then if a woman chooses that she wants to have kids and she wants to be a mom, because that's like, it's a meaningful thing. It's what people like, some people really want to do that. And then they go like, no, you're making the wrong choice. You're like, what are you doing? Why aren't you stepping up? Why aren't you standing up for the sisterhood or whatever it is? And it's so sad. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Yeah.
It's like,
That's
let
like,
people make their own choices, you
well,
know?
and this is like, I mean, I've realized this as Eva has been getting older, and she'll
Mm.
be like, when she's like, when I'm like, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? And this literally happened, and I'm totally like self-flagellation mom for doing this. She was like, well, I want to be a mom, and I was like, oh, baby, you're so much better than that. And I was like, oh my
Oh,
gosh! But it was like a year later that I was like, wait, what did I say? You
yeah.
know? And I think, and it's this huge narrative around, and it's endemic in like all of us, to include the people who chose to be full-time moms, you know, for their kids. It's, I mean, I tell myself that narrative too, of like, oh, but you're so much better than that, you know, like.
It's not to say that you can't do other things, you know, like being a mom isn't mutually exclusive with other things, you know, like my mom worked really hard. Like when we were kids, she had a full-time job and she worked really hard, but she also was there for the family. And part of that was also that she was lucky enough that my dad had his own business and he could work from home, so he could do things like driving us to school and picking us up from school early or something. Like that they worked together. That's why I think, like, I don't know, the family is such an important thing. And to kind of degrade motherhood in the way that we have in the modern era, as though it's like some kind of crime. Like I've literally heard like politicians in the United States saying like, you know, is it ethical to be a parent or something? Like, is it ethical to bring children into this world? And it's like, what are you talking about? Like, that doesn't even, the question doesn't even make sense to me.
Well, and so I'm going to call you out on something here, even because
Go
I
for
hear
it.
this like narrative, even in what you were saying, when you were like, my mom worked really hard at her job. And I'm like, when did we determine that the job was the thing that you did outside of the house? Let me tell you, I have
Mm,
been the director of operations for a nonprofit. I have been
mm.
CEO of my own company. I have been a government contractor, and I have been a mom full time. None the time when I worked the hardest was when I was the
Yeah,
mom full
I'm sure my
time.
mum worked really hard as a mum too.
Yeah, and so that it's like, even this, just like saying, well, you can work too. Like, I'm sorry, what do you mean? Like, what kind of a
Mm.
narrative are we saying when it's like, well, you can work as well when you're a mom? And it's like, but no, but you are working when you're a mom.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe like define terms, like work as in you can work outside of the home, you can get a job, you can do this. And there are so many options open now, especially like I think more than ever in human history, just because of the convenience of our lives. You know, there are so many options for us. And I really think that people should be awake to those possibilities. Like whatever it is that you want, you have to go for it. But you also, I think the thing that we don't talk about anywhere near enough is the responsibility on the other side of that, right? It's like when you make your choice, you have to own that choice. You
Yeah,
can't make a choice to have kids and then complain that, you know, you don't get all of the other stuff that you get when you don't have kids. You know, it's like, oh, I can't go on holidays anymore as much as I want to, or I can't do this, or everything's really expensive, or it's like, well, if you made the choice to have children, you got to own that choice, and it's no one else's fault, you know. I mean, unless it is someone else's fault, but it's usually not. So being able to choose that and own it, I think that's an empowering thing, you know, to say, well, you know, I made this choice and I cut off doors to myself. I said, you know, I'm going to live in Japan for 10 years, and so I cut off the possibility of, you know, working in the UK and working up in different companies. And now, you know, if I go back, I'm not going to have the same opportunities because I've basically spent like 8 years in Japan teaching kindergartens and international schools, and yeah, like starting my own business as well and doing other things. So it's definitely changed me, and I think it's definitely changed me for the better. But, you know, I made those choices. I'm continuing to make those choices every day.
yeah. Yeah, I think that idea of like conscious choice making is really, really, really important. And I think I've talked about it before on here too, of like, of not introducing a victim into the system. And I mean, I've been super guilty of doing this for a really long
What do you
time.
mean introducing a victim?
So like, when in conversation, when someone will say like, um like, Well, I have kids, so I just it stinks because I can't go on holiday anymore, right?
Mm,
That's introducing a victim into the conversation, into this
okay.
system, whatever that is. It's just introducing a victim that's there. It's introducing that victim voice. You've done the
Okay.
saboteur stuff, right?
No, that was
Okay.
the leadership one, right? I didn't do that
Yeah.
one.
So it's like, so we have empowering voices or empowering narratives,
Mhm.
and then we have the disempowering narratives, right? And one of the disempowering narratives, if you want to call it that, is that victim of like, I'm a
Mm,
victim
mm,
of life. And it can come out in so many different ways. And really interestingly, and this is something that I am so interested in because of like conflict resolution and just kind of
mhm,
those sorts of, when people are pointing at each other, when like one person is standing over here and they have a point of view, and another person standing over here and they have a point of view, and there's a topic that they're talking about in the middle. If they keep that topic in the middle, then they start pointing fingers at each other and blaming each other for it. And that is just simply introducing the victim into the system. Like if you think of the
mm.
whole thing as a system, it's just introducing the victim narrative. It's choosing the victim narrative for that system, whatever it is. So like,
By doing what? Like by asking the other person to or like saying the other person that they're doing something?
so like for example, if there's one side over here that believes that no abortions, and there's
Okay.
one side over here that believes abortions for all, and then there's like the topic in the middle is abortion, then what they do is they sit there and they start pointing fingers at each other and being
Mm,
like, you're bad because you're doing this. You're bad because you're doing this. And it introduces just a victim narrative into the system. They're
mm.
choosing that victim narrative. Whereas
Like
if they can,
it's your fault.
yes,
Like
faultiness,
it's yeah,
blame, not
right.
being responsible for it, right? Whereas if you can take the topic and move it out so that both of the parties are standing next to each other and
Mm,
saying, oh, look at this topic out here, instead of them pointing fingers at each other, they're pointing at the topic and saying, look, we're standing next to each other. We co-created this situation. How
mm,
can we now do something about it? What can we create to build on it for the next thing? And so
mm,
it's taking out that victim narrative and it's choosing a more empowering narrative for
mm.
that issue, for that system that they're
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I try to do that in my high school classes that I'm currently teaching. I do this thing called a Socratic Seminar, and any teachers who that are listening might have heard of a Socratic Seminar. And the idea behind a Socratic Seminar is that it's kind of similar to a debate, but the thing with a debate is that people have already picked their sides before the debate starts, and they've done their research, and they're like, this is my position. Whereas a Socratic Seminar, you don't come with a pre-chosen position. You come to try and figure out what is the truth. And so whenever you start debating, or if they start debating or start arguing, the role of like a facilitator, like a teacher like myself, is to say, okay, so you're debating, and that's not what this is for. Remember that this is for finding out what is true, just finding facts that we can agree on, and then having discussions about the implications of those facts. Like the abortion thing is like people can point that finger at each other. They can point it at a topic outside. They can also point it at themselves.
in.
And there, all of those things can glean some truth, but none of them by themselves can glean the total truth.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I personally think that so I used to think of conversation as being this place of to debate, to find the absolute truth, what the absolute truth was in the situation. And now I think of it a lot more as like building blocks or Legos of like, how are we going to build on top of each other? Because I think getting to that absolute truth, it can feel like the elephant, it can feel like this huge mountain out there that we're like, whoa, we got to get to the absolute truth. And it's like, okay, let's just get one step ahead. Let's figure out what's the one step ahead of now, and then let's go do that thing.
Mm. And I think people don't realize how long it takes sometimes, because people do change their minds. I change my mind frequently, and I think I'm a lot more susceptible to changing my mind than maybe a lot of other people, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. But it can take a long time. You can sometimes, like when you have changed your mind on something, you can trace it back sometimes to an experience you had, you know, like I can trace back my shift in thinking about, I don't know, like, I can't think of a great example, but you can see like how you thought when you were a kid, and then there's like an event that something happened, like someone told you something, and you're like, oh, and then it took you a year to work through that. You know what I mean? Like it can take you a year to actually change your opinion, really, when you know what changed it. So when people go into debates thinking like, okay, I'm going to change someone's mind right now in the next 20 minutes, it's like, well, maybe, but it's unlikely. And actually, maybe all you need to do is just to talk with them in a way that gets them to hear you. And that's all you really need, is if they hear you. And then you're not taking responsibility. Yeah, you're opening the door. You're not taking responsibility for them changing their whole mind, their whole perspective.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. And I think it's such an incredibly, that I think is such an incredibly important point. And I think that helps me personally to, I get worked up in conversations sometimes.
Oh,
And
really? I don't believe you. I've never experienced that with you before in my life, Carmen.
I try, right? And I
When
try,
we're hanging out in Rome and you're getting all worked up, and I'm like, can I say something? And you're like, nope, I'm going.
I'm a very passionate person, okay? Yeah.
Yes.
So
I
yeah.
love that about you.
And
Yeah.
it is, I think it's very helpful to know when it is appropriate to balance that passion with the kind of like openness. I think
Mm,
that's sort of how I think of it, of like how am I going to be super passionate about this thing and really stand for it, because I think it's a perspective that needs to be heard in this situation. And then how am I going to just let it go? You know, how am I going to then be open to receiving the other perspectives that are coming in? I did this thing with my group a few weeks ago that was cloud and tree. And it's like, how can, sometimes you need to be a cloud and just let it like float through you and observe what's going on. And sometimes you really need to be a tree and just be like that passionate voice of like, and I'm going to stand up for this perspective in this dialogue.
mm. I like that idea. Um, I wonder if I'm not sure if I agree with it, in terms of like because I don't know how to know which time I should do what. Um, One of the things that I really benefited a lot from was Marshall Rosenberg's ideas about nonviolent communication. And yeah, I've talked about it with you before, and one of his core principles is understanding your having a vocabulary for your own needs, and not expecting other people to meet those needs. And so when it comes to like, you know, debating ideas with people, arguing with people, and trying to figure out like what's your perspective on things, what's your attitude towards things, you've got to own your own feelings. No one can make you feel a certain way. And I used to say that all the time, like, and you hear it all the time from people, like, you made me sad. And it's like, no, nobody can make you sad. That's impossible. You make yourself sad with your interpretation of other people's actions. And like I don't know, the idea of like of having to stand against something really strongly, I don't know if that necessarily works, you know, like I'm because usually I'm preoccupied with the idea, like what actually works, what actually changes people's hearts and minds, what actually gets people to hear you. And it seems like to me a lot of the time it's about connecting with people first. And I think especially like when you're a tree, if you're like, I'm not moving, I'm rooted, you know, then that can prevent other people from being able to hear you, you know.
I mean, I hear you. I do. I understand what you're saying, really honestly. And and I think it's an important thing to keep inside of our heads, of like, of exactly that, of how much are we going to stand, um how much are we going to stand in that rooted position.
Mm,
And what I would say is, I spent too much of my life being allowed to not be rooted in that way,
mm,
and really 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 just being so open and seeing all of these different perspectives and all of these different possibilities, which frankly was really amazing for me, because I grew, like, I grew a lot as a human being, because I allowed myself to be wrong over and over and over and over and over again.
mm,
Because I think in every situation, no matter what, you can always find a quote unquote right and a quote unquote wrong. I think that there's
Mm.
always, it's never 100%, you know what I mean? And so I so frequently allowed myself to be in the wrong, and I grew so much. And it's taken me time in the last few years to really be like, no, I do know some things, you know, like
Mm.
this is a powerful perspective. And I would
Mm.
say that, like, for me, with the being the tree, instead of it standing against other people, it's
Yeah.
standing for the other people that are behind me. You know what I mean?
Okay.
It's standing for for that position, because I'm not the only one that carries that position. And I think that when I like to think of, like, so, and this is something that I teach in my in the workshops and stuff like that, is you have to take that red passion and almost like rebellious passionate energy, and and you have to use it in service to the love, like that really pink love of, like, this is the thing that I think that we should go for. And when I look at people who are like the great leaders of the past, if like Martin Luther King is a really, really great example of that. If you listen to him speaking, he is speaking like a tree. Like, the man is like a tree. Like, he is definitely standing for something, and he is speaking for this perspective, and he's using all of this passion for this perspective, and then he's doing it wrapped up kind of in love, you know, like it's mingled with
Mm.
that love. And I think what you said is super important, that he's like, I'm not going to change your mind in this instant. Like, maybe some
Mm.
people I will, and maybe some
Yeah.
people I won't. That's not what matters. What matters
Right.
is that I need to speak my truth in this way at this moment now, because that's what I need to do.
So a tangent off of that, as I'm listening about Martin Luther King, is I wonder what you think he would say to the narratives that people have um, about the world today. It seems like there are so many people who are worried that the world is in a worse position than it was when he was, fighting for people's civil rights, and and when people choose their narrative about that, when they choose their story, like they choose the story like I'm trying to think of a better example, but there's the one recently of Elizabeth Warren, as she drops out of the US presidential race, that she's saying it's because of sexism. And that's also choosing a story, that's choosing a perspective, right? And I don't know, like I have so much faith in women because I have so many strong women in my life, and I have so many strong women, like growing up, like both of my sisters are like, you've met one of my sisters, and both of my sisters are like super inspiring, strong, powerful women. My mom is like a business leader in the UK. Like I grew up with women who just didn't give a shit what anyone thought and just did what they wanted to do. And then to have someone saying, like, oh, you can't do anything because you're a woman, I'm like, God, I have so much more faith in women than you do, you know? Like, I don't know. I feel like people are choosing that narrative over and over in schools and in society, and it makes me really sad because I don't know. I think that people have a lot of potential that if they just choose that, like, you know what, I'm not going to let anything stop me. This is my thing. This is what I'm going to do, and don't let anyone stop me. And they could choose that at any time.
I think, again, I think that goes back to that victim narrative, you know, of like, well,
Yeah.
I'm dropping out because of somebody else or some
Yeah.
external thing or whatever. You know, I think it's introducing this, like, poor me, I'm in this
Mm.
victim mentality. So if Martin Luther King were here, I think he would be like, go live in your integrity, figure out what
Yeah.
you stand for, and go stand for it. Like, I think in watching his speeches and his stuff, that's what I feel like comes out over and over again. And like, not in a combative way, right? Just
Mm.
in a, like, I love this analogy. We're like, if we think of the world as an 8 billion piece puzzle, you know, and each one of us is a piece of that puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're not going to see the picture unless each one of us figures out what our puzzle piece looks like, you know, and then is that puzzle piece, you know what I mean? And like, and it's not like a kind of going back to the controlling of, controlling life and stuff like that. It's like not in a like I'm going to force my piece into this spot, but like I'm going to look
Right.
at what's going on around me, and I'm going to kind of go with the flow to find where my piece fits into this world. And
Yeah.
I think the piece changes over time. Like my experience, it's not like I figured out what my piece looked like and then that's it, on this, I'm done for the rest of my life. I think that it changed. I think
Mm.
it moves over time as well. And I don't think that any of us are going to know what that puzzle looks like if we don't figure out what each one of our pieces really is.
Doesn't that take the thing is that takes such a commitment to self-exploration that I think so many people are just unwilling to do. Like, and maybe not just unwilling to do. Maybe that's the wrong word. Maybe it's like a lot of people, they don't know that they need to do that, or that they don't think that they should do that. There are a lot of people who are like, this is who I am. And even, years after they've decided that, like they continue doing something that maybe is not actually their calling, or not actually their like true to who they are. They're like, they put their piece down, it's like it fits on one side, but like the three other sides are completely mismatched. And they're like, well, I got this is where I'm supposed to be because it fits on this side. I know that's right. And it's like, well, it could fit on that side somewhere else. Like a lot of people, and I see this a lot, and I'm kind of like bringing it back to Japan a little bit, but so many people get locked up in that work being that one side that they have to get right. And I think this probably happens, I'm sure it happens in the West as well, that people focus so much on getting the right work, and then they forget that there are other sides to them that they haven't developed, like the family, their hobbies, like their passions and things that they care about. And I wonder how many people give up their passions so that they can have a good job, just so they can pay for their family and survive. And that's
Oh, I think
yeah.
there's so many things that could be said for like that is like we just opened up Pandora's box. I think there's so many different things that like there's so many Lego blocks that I could build on top of what
But
you
I
just
like this jigsaw analogy. It's really good. Like the 8 billion piece jigsaw. Like I really like that idea. Um, it just then can be overwhelming to think that we have so many choices. There's such a thing as like having too many choices, and being paralyzed by the number of choices that you can make.
I think that that's totally true. And so I would say for me personally, um, two things that are kind of cropping up the most from what you
Okay.
just said, which is one is I think it's important to be multi-passionate. If we even started this discussion about it because you're talking about being a multi-passionate entrepreneur and like coming up with like not just being one-sided. And I think that that is
Mm.
something, it's something that's so cool that's coming out from, I think our generation is really really expanding on this idea of like you don't have to just have one job your whole life or one career or whatever. You can be really multi-passionate. And I think when we allow ourselves to explore the multidimensionality of each one of us, it's like it mirrors that possibility to other people. And I think it gives other people then this place to go to see themselves as well in all these different ways. And then the second, so that's the first thing that I would say is the
Mhm.
multi-passionate. I think that's really important. And then the second part about it that I would say is I think this is why old people are super important and why we need to stop sidelining them in society. Seriously, like, because I love old people. Like, I've loved old people ever since I was little. I used to
I
be
I
like,
love some old people.
oh,
I
I
love
love them
some old.
all. Oh, they're so great. They're so amazing. They're so much fun. Even the grumpy ones they're just so wonderful. And I find great peace with old people. I think that or older people,
Mm.
um, and and perspective. Like there's
Mm.
so much there. And when I talk with older people, they will be like, "Well, what's really important in this world, Carmen?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I totally need to think about that, don't I?
Yeah.
That is true."
Mm. Yeah. I maybe my perspective is kind of impacted by the experiences I've had with old people in Japan who are very traditional and sometimes very funny and sometimes incredibly sweet. And then sometimes they like, complain about kids crossing the street or something and making too much noise, and it's like, well, they're kids, like, you know, and things like that. And the old people who stare at me on the trains and things like that. So yeah, I actually do kind of uh I wish that I had known more about my grandparents,
Mm.
because I knew my grandparents on my mum's side not very well. I mean, my grandfather was actually in a concentration camp in he was in Auschwitz, and I never really got to know him, even though he died when I was a teenager. But you know, just seeing him, it was always very difficult to talk to him about anything. You know, like it was, I don't know, it was an odd. He was perhaps understandably a difficult character. But I never got to meet my dad's parents. Like, I think my dad's mom died when I was very little. I don't remember her at all. And my dad's dad died before I was born. So it's very sad. Like, I really wish I had met them, because there's so much stuff that I would love to talk to them about. Like, one of the things that I really love is that so I'm really into baking, right? So I love baking bread. And my grandfather on my dad's side was a baker. That was his profession. And so it's one of those things, like, I really actually feel like somehow close to this guy that I never met by baking bread, you know, because I'm doing something that he probably had a lot of passion for.
I love it.
Hmm.
I think you're such a baker in so many different ways. I love it. I love how you mix things together and then you like stick it in the oven and you're like, what's going to happen? It's going to be crunchy on the outside and delicious and chewy on the inside. So, yeah.
Kind of a metaphor for life, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
All right. I think that's about all the time that we have for today.
It's such a pleasure to talk with you, as always.
Likewise, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for gracing us with your wonderful, wonderful presence.
Yeah, thank you for talking with me.
And yeah, let's do it again. I think it'd be fun.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Let's speak soon.
All right. Love you all.
Mwah.
Bye-bye.